Appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's so cool to see both Danielle and Pat and Terry put on such a great course. It's amazing because I remember when I was a medical student, I actually did a rotation at University of Washington, and Jens Chapman was the attending. And then as a medical student, I spent time with Pat. And then Pat sent up Danielle to do his fellowship here. And Danielle had this great idea as a fellow. He said, there's all this cool technology that's coming out. I want to do a course. And on his own, as a fellow, he put this whole thing together. And it wasn't really even robotics. It was mostly technology at the time. So it's been cool to watch this whole thing kind of evolve. And robotics is really kind of taken off. And I have a little video, actually. I think you guys would enjoy me playing it.
Yes, it is. Which one? Or
yeah.
both?
Yeah, no, just the one. Just the one on the left. That's Big Sky.
It's
Okay.
on the left.
Oh, okay. So, I think it kind of goes to my journey, having grown up and in Seattle, and the kids I went to school with were all techies. There was this little startup called Microsoft, and all the parents worked there, and we had MS-DOS. I remember when we had Pine was like the first email, and we were able to, kind of play around with software and technology, and it's cool to see it evolve. And I think for me, the most important thing about all this technology is, and I think you guys are talking about it today,
It's on the wrong screen here.
is it's going to make us better surgeons. It's going to, I think it's going to increase accuracy. I think, I think Nick talked a little bit about this whole thing where there's a cognitive load. It's just a different way to operate. And I just recently over the last year switched to, great, awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I switched to, and I think these technologies do take time. And I started, kind of using the robot to do, just kind of degenerative cases. And let's see if it's still there, Ben. And then it's slowly evolved. I was going to show a cool video of Michael Jordan. Let me see if I can find it. But it goes to this whole concept, there's some really great surgeons in the room. And so when I look at Pat Johnson or Jens Chapman, shoot, it's not there. These people have spent thousands of hours doing these complicated surgeries. And, I think between training and what's gone on, it really, how do you train someone like a Pat Johnson or a Jens Chapman? When you get, and I think for me, cases, so I do think when you do use technology, I think you start with easier cases and then slowly, gradually move on. So I thought it would be good just to talk about cases that I've done with robotics. Is that, I initially started using it. I used it in degenerative cases. And then I said to myself, if I can do an L4-5 fusion with a robot, what are the limits? How can we use this for like larger cases? And, being in a tertiary care environment, we get these really horrific cases. So this is a patient who presented. She was in her 70s. She actually was a teacher, had a spinal cord injury about 50 years ago, was perfectly fine, working as a teacher, and then developed, basically, she had some sacral decubes that got infected, and then she came to the hospital with this. And it's courses like this where, you see other surgeons pushing technology. And I think for robotics, again, after having done close to 100 cases, if you look at the anatomy on this case, it's pretty incredible. That was her exam, and you can see how you can see on the 3D reconstruction here, the pedicles are all altered. You're not going to see that well intraoperatively if you're using fluoro. And so, how do you reconstruct the spinal column in a case like this? You can shoot maybe 200-300 fluoro shots during the case. And again, putting the screws in for me was, a significant challenge when you're doing cases like this where the surgical anatomy is altered. And so I think this is a perfect case of using robotics, because what you're doing is you're using navigation. And again, people kind of talk about, well, you're basically, it's a robotic arm and it's just placing screws. But yeah, I mean, this is a really unbelievable case, and it's a great case to be able to put screws in. And what's incredible, and this is and I think Nick mentioned it, and these are MRIs, but you kind of have to you have to merge, you have to register, you have to get the planning software to kind of recognize what it is. And segmental tracking has really changed the game, and I think it's going to continue to evolve and get better. But you can see here, look at the pedicles and the altered anatomy on this patient. And if you look at the axials, how many levels do you do? Again, for me on a case like this, you're going to need to really it's basically Charcot arthropathy. You're going to have to debride that whole level, realign the spine, and, put in, quad rods. Again, if you do this case the traditional way, you're going to spend all day, trying to make sure. And then, we're fortunate we've got an intraoperative CT scanner. But you also have to, and this is the other thing that I've learned over the last year, is that we're really smart. And I think this is where surgeons can get in trouble. You do have to have a good team. You have to have a good rep. You have to rely on other people who kind of know this technology. For example, whether using, the Mako, Excelsius, or the Mazor, they all have kind of their quirky, let's say registration, manipulating the skin. How far do you keep the trackers away? So you have to have a really good team. Again, the setup, this is our team in Seattle. It's Judd Hunter and Tim Adelson. And then this is the setup. So, there's a lot that goes into doing these cases. You have to register, you have to get the arm in. And so it does there is a big learning curve. And then the staff kind of fights it, right? They don't want to do the draping. They're tired of, okay, this is just another robot. Nobody's going to use it. And so you kind of have to, there is a psychological, emotional barrier in the operating room. The nurses do not like new technology, especially if they can't figure out what it is, so it's kind of you do have to, and this is the part that nobody really tells you about, but you kind of have to have a team and they get used to it. The way you drape, the way you put the, instruments in. And you can see it's not an insignificant amount of instrumentation and things that you have to do. But again, once you do a few cases and you start to understand the technology. And what's crazy is here, this is that last case. I literally planned every screw on the computer, and this is what it looked like. You could put the mirror image of my plan over what we actually accomplished. And to me, that's amazing, And again, once you register it, placing the screws, maybe all together for all this took maybe a half an hour. It was very smooth, very quick. Now, we did still have to do, the corpectomy. And again, she was paralyzed and this was infected. So we put in cement And Jens and I did this case together. And again, the video I was going to show was Michael Jordan is, not all of us are as good as Jens Chapman or Pat Johnson. These guys are, and the training, think about the training you have to do to become a Jens Chapman, right? You have to do thousands and thousands and thousands of cases. And with the robot, again, are we cheating? Is it, people are kind of paranoid about, the doctors kind of losing control. Actually, I feel the opposite. And I agree with Nick and the other people here. Every screw that was placed in here was exactly where I planned it. I didn't have to revise anything. I didn't have to use fluoro. And it's just a different mindset when you're in surgery. I'm not sweating. I don't have my lead, using a million shots. And Mark Kramer, who is one of our fellows, did this case with me. And there's another fellow, Nick Minasali. And it was fun. Wasn't stressed about, okay, is it the screws medial, lateral? And of course, sure, you still have to do the corpectomy. And again, I think that technology is going to evolve and it's just going to continue to get better and better. And I've started using it on more cases, more complex cases. And again, you're going to see, so for example, this is a patient, you can tell that's got a pretty significant thoracic curve. And obviously this was an adolescent idiopathic that progressed as an adult. And you can just see on this x-ray, in her thoracic spine, she's not going to have any pedicles on one side. If she's going to have them, they're going to be really, really tiny. And again, this is where, you think about it, you'd spend 3-4 hours just placing the screws, exposing, getting every single shot, maybe shooting 300-400 fluoro shots. And then, by the time you do that, you're just exhausted. And again, this patient was neurologically intact. Here's her curve. And she had progressed pretty significantly. How do you correct a case like this? Well, you can certainly do this open and do the traditional approach. And these are just some of the, you can see in here, the anatomy is really altered, especially in the thoracic spine. Here's a thoracic spine. You can see, on some of these levels, she just doesn't even have a pedicle. So how do you get fixation on someone like this? That's a real challenge. And I think using technology as surgeons, we're still in charge. It's just going to make you a better surgeon. Patient's going to have a better outcome. You're not going to spend all day putting screws in on a case like this. And I really think, again, you look at, the 3D CT on a case like this, it's pretty crazy, the anatomy and how altered everything is. And for me, these are great cases to use technology, use navigation, use robotics. It can really, I think, make the case go a lot smoother. You can see here's the intraoperative. I usually get an AP and a lateral because the robot can be off, right? So you got to double check the robot. And I always tell the fellows, and you have to watch the arm too. So I always mark the midline so you can kind of get a sense of where everything is just on an AP. And I tell the fellows, because it's really important, it's like any technology, right? If you have, for example, we all probably would not be able to get to where we wanted to go if we didn't have Google Maps or, some sort of navigation, right? But navigation can also be wrong. So if you get to the edge of a cliff, and you're looking at your map, hopefully you're not going to keep going. And robotics is kind of like that. You have to really watch it, and you have to make sure you get AP, lateral, floor shots. And this is that case. I do think, again, for me in my practice, I've seen less proximal junctional less distal failures. Here's our X-rays. You can see we got pretty awesome correction. And I wish I could show you the CT. I should have gotten CTs on here. Post-op, every single screw was exactly how we planned it. Now, of course, obviously that it shifted and the plan didn't look like this in terms of, post-correction, but the screws were exactly where we placed them. And again, on a case like this, I think using technology to help you is the future. And, I don't think residents and fellows are going to get enough training. There's only so many Jens Chapmans and Pat Johnson. I mean, those guys spent thousands and thousands of hours doing cases. And I think that's the future, right? And, doing a case like this, using robotics, I think that's what's is next. And I'm really excited. I think all the companies are really doing a great job of, pushing the technology and it's incredible. And, I can't wait for AI, segmental tracking. All those things are going to really change the game. So thank you for letting me talk today.
So, Rod, are you fully converted to being a robotic surgeon, or do you have selected cases you don't do? I've really tried to, it's crazy. Like, I love using the robot. But right now, obviously cervical, you can't use it, not yet, at least. For, I do a lot of, I think, artificial discs, things like that. I do think there's going to be more and more, like drilling, autonomous drilling, things. And I don't know if Chris Hofstadter is still here. I mean, I think, even endoscopic, are you going to really need to like have 4 different ports when you can just drill it off, with the drill? And I've done that. In fact, I didn't show, but I've got some cases where I've used a robot to do a partial corpectomy. It's off-label, but you can do it. Basically you can create these little drill windows, and I've done it to do laminectomies. It's unbelievable how accurate it is. Like, it would leave an eggshell of bone over the dura. So I don't use it for everything, but I'm really intrigued by how accurate it is.
Really great examples of where a robot really helps a lot. In that Charcot spine, I take care of a lot of those, and as you know, like an ankylosing spondylitis fracture, those could be really stable. What's your work, really unstable in terms of movement, even in the OR? What's your workflow to try and make sure that, do you have reference frames on either side of it, or how do you actually place reference frames and have your workflow to make sure you're not missing out on a virtual image?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real problem with all these, whatever system you do. And I think what like on that case, we had one reference frame down below and then one up in the thoracic spine, and you have to constantly, monitor that. I think it's going to get better, but it does shift. And so after we place our screws, in fact, Jens and I did that case together. I wish I had the intraoperative view, but you could just see completely, you could see the chest wall move when we reduced it. So once you do that, the navigation's off. Yeah. And so you have to be really cognizant of that. It's a big problem. So. Yeah.